Recording is on.
Welcome to the governance discussion. I wanted to kick off first with gas refunds, just revisiting a bit from last week. We had presented some of the initial data that Nico had sent, and he actually put it into a post, and there are a couple things with that. I'm just going to quickly share my screen for that application window for the Nico post. Is that coming? Yeah. Okay. So actually, Nico did an update this morning. So I think there are kind of two things to take from it. Just for Nico's post here, these are the kind of numbers for the latest period. This is up about 2 ETH from the previous post because of the execution bot, or kind of what the whole discussion around how that's working. So there's a couple bit more there. So we can see the numbers are kind of like 21.6 ETH. This is for like, I think, a 7-week period, August 24th to like October 10th, so around there. So pretty significant spend. And then just above, I had taken the some of the proposals, and I just kind of classified them into some of the commonly used things that we're doing. Obviously, some of these have their own scheme themselves, like the token registration, but a lot of things actually happen through the funding and voting power. And so you can see, like, most of our proposals, unsurprisingly, are worker compensation proposals, and then we had a huge portion of these that are like rep rewards. And so I'm just thinking about, like, this, how we can be more efficient in this. I think this is, helps us kind of understand where the proposals are being used. So just wanted to kick that off. Nico, I don't know if you had anything to add on kind of calculation or the process going forward.
Yeah, so in general, what we added in the last update, it was like an idea from Sky, and we should find consensus about it. Is like in the first post, we only included refunding of transaction regarding execution of proposals. So once the DAO ratified a proposal, to refund those costs. But as the bot was not running mainly in September, some individual users were also executing transaction to boost proposals. That's something we included in the second post, but for sure we haven't ratified about like really refunding that. That's something we should find consensus about it.
Yeah, and I think the bot, the bot has been on discussion yesterday, the developer call and elsewhere. So I think there's, what do we do about those processes going forward? Because I think, like, you need them, like, to function. DXgov needs that as a function. So however, we should come to some agreement on that. And I think the conversation specifically on, like, what about the last 6 or 7 weeks when the bot wasn't running, we had to do that manually. So I think for that one, that kind of seems, I think, given that we were refunding the other gas expenditures, I think those kind of would fall into that under this probably same pretenses. I guess going forward, like, I feel like we should think about a different system, as we've kind of talked about before, but I don't know if others have thoughts.
The easier solution that Nico is proposing, like, going forward, is if the bot runs out of money, like, Nico sends a couple ETH to it, you basically funding the bot with his own money, and then ask for a reimbursement from DAO. That makes it much cleaner to let the bot do all the transactions. The other thing is we're trusting this one bot. So the way to decentralize that is to actually create a bunch more bots that look at the same thing and all execute. But really, they're only going to do that if they're incentivized to do that, which is what happens actually in model like DAO. Like, you get paid when you execute. So but that would be a change to the system. But that's a longer term decentralized answer.
Cool. And yeah, I don't think we're going to figure out how to do that here. So I guess the Nico specifically just on the consensus on the last one. I think that makes sense. Over the last, in September, there's not really any difference between those actions and voting and executing on that.
The other topic, which I wrote a little about in the governance chat, is like big picture. If we actually want to reduce the amount of money that we're spending on governance, how do you do that? And we don't right now, we don't know if we even want to do that, but let's say we did want to do that. Chris's analysis of like which types of proposals are taking up the most number of proposals, but you actually have to then say how many people actually vote on those proposals and how much did it cost. And so what we had like 10 people voting on every worker proposal to get a high percentage turnout. But even if you had 1 or 2 people vote, they would still pass, right? So it's safer to have more people vote, but then it's way more expensive. So if we all said, okay, everyone submits a worker proposal, like let's just have 2 people vote on each of them, but actually somewhere else, either on Octane or on DXgov, like 15 people all said that like we're okay with those worker proposals, but only 2 people actually voted enough to get it to pass. You would actually save 80 to 90% of the cost that we've spent voting on mainnet, and that's only if we want to actually save money, not spending it on gas, basically. But we haven't decided if we want to do that. And the fewer people that vote on mainnet, the riskier it is, because some big person could come in at the last second and do the opposite vote. And like, if it was an important proposal, you probably wouldn't want to do this. But for worker proposals, you're assuming no one's going to come in and vote against it at the last second. That you don't need 20 people to vote on each of the worker proposals, right? So that'd be the way to save money if that's what we wanted to do, but we haven't decided that.
Yeah, I think it's that's why looking at the amount spent and then also like the specific proposals. I think it's like, okay, how do we make worker compensation proposals cheaper, right? And like, I'm not sure what the solution to that is, but like I think clearly, if you just look at kind of the governance costs, that's taking like a big chunk of that.
Well, but in that scenario, like because there were like 20 of them, right? But instead of, if you had 20 worker proposals in that period, you basically just need fewer people voting on them to make sure they pass. Yeah. That would save a lot of the money.
That's just like tough. I mean, people voted themselves, right? Like people's individual wallets. Obviously, they're responding to incentives from DXgov in terms of subsidizing some of those like costs, but it's not like the DXgov has any say over whether or not how many people vote on proposals or not. We only have like some incentives to build there.
But really, there is no incentive for us to vote on those proposals.
Yep.
Other than like we want to get improved stats for DXgov, which is kind of one of our goals, to have like strong participation, right?
Yeah. Especially talking about like the worker proposals, there might be also more efficient ways in doing that. Like if you're an employer in a company in the traditional world, you don't have to submit a proposal each month as well. So the same way as we're thinking about vesting contracts, we might start thinking about worker proposals as well. Let's say you start your worker proposal and you just update it if you level up or level down, if you change your commitment level or stuff like that, so that you don't need to update it every month, every second month. That could bring a lot of efficiency and gas spendings in that process.
Yeah, I think that's like where I'm thinking about this more, is like how does this scale, right? Because if we're going to have, or I say like from a broad perspective, I think it's important to remember like paying contributors is like a core function of the DAO, right? That's really what leads to all of these other things of products being built, of different communication around the community. It's because of that like core function. And you think of like, what's the difference between DXDAO and a company? Well, it's like a company has a bank account that they can pay people through, and they have to go through a whole bunch of services, payroll. Like, it's very expensive for companies kind of to do this. So I'm just thinking about this. This is not like a kind of a side project. It does get to the core function of DXDAO, and that's why kind of hearing what Nico is saying, I'm thinking about what's the system for if we're going to do 50 worker proposals a month, right? Because like I don't think we can do that through Alchemy right now, or kind of like the current. And then this does get into kind of the vesting discussion. And so I don't know if we're going to solve it all here, but I think it's not just kind of like tweaking how do we figure out how to pay the current workers more cheaply, which I think is important, but it's like, what's the system for scaling past that?
But I guess my overall point is the number of worker proposals was not the majority cost. It was the number of votes on each of the proposals that's the majority cost. So it's okay if everyone just did their worker proposal once per month and got paid. That's like 2 proposals every 2 months. Well, with DXD, it might be you might double that, right? Because you're going to have the vesting part. But it's the 10 votes on each of those 20 things by 10 different people or 15 different people on top of the actual proposals. That's the biggest majority of the cost of gas.
Right, but that is a function of governance, and I don't think we should dismiss that as useless, even if it is not necessary to pass a proposal, right? Because, I mean, people are kind of voicing and making it known how they feel about a worker proposal, and they're not necessarily always going to pass, right? There's going to potentially be contentious ones and the need to kind of change things. So I think in general, we should not discourage voter participation, and we should focus on ways to minimize costs in other dimensions.
But on mainnet with gas where it is, like on mainnet participation is going to cost this much money. Like there's not really a way to reduce it unless you do fewer votes. And so that means do votes somewhere else and then put them all on as one onto mainnet or something, right?
Right, and there's nothing coming like immediately in the near term for this, but there is some thought and thinking being done about basically the scalability of this, right? So like,
yeah,
I think potentially there will be solutions in the future to kind of help mitigate the, like, basically collapsing the cost of the number of votes per proposal to like equate basically one.
Yeah. And so currently it seems like DXDAO community is okay spending a few $1,000s every couple months. That's the cost of decentralized government in the current state of how the system works. Like, we don't have a choice. And unless we want to decrease participation, which we actually in general want to increase participation, that's just the cost. And so we're doing the best we can. Yeah.
On the other side, we should take into account the first refund, which is open, I guess, around 5 or 6 weeks. Only 25% has been claimed of all of the refunds. So how much actually will be refunded for all of the accounts is like an open question as well.
Yeah, it would be good to that would actually be a good like case scenario, like finding who some of those people are who spent a chunk of money on voting, and either they don't know about this refund, they haven't looked at DXDAO in a long time, they don't care about it, and actually like seeking out like 5 of those people and learning what's happened to them or why they don't want the refund. And we're not going to find all 100 of them, right? But learning.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting too. I would be interested in kind of like just knowing who they are in general and just like as a way of engaging with them.
Which would be awesome if we could send notes to addresses. Like if you could send an email to a wallet address. Like how does that service not? I mean, someone tried to do that, but like how does that service should work? Like everyone should be using that service.
Yeah, I'd be interested in just doing some forensics work on who those people are, and just like, if they're voting but not claiming, what else are they doing on chain?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, I think obviously we'll talk about gas stuff with XDAI, but just in terms of like the gas refunds and that, I think pretty good spot to move on. And then because I wanted to close up on like governance 1.0 stuff or things that were currently in the queue, I did just want to talk briefly about two proposals that were there that I know I wasn't sure what to do with them, I guess, in terms of like voting or that. And so one is the Omen gas one, and then the other is the funding the alchemy execution bot, which I guess we just talked about that with Nico. So Nico, you want to start with the alchemy execution bot? You know, it's a proposal. So that would basically send 10 ETH when the previous 10 ETH would go away, or how exactly did that work?
Yep. So currently the bot is like operated by DAOstack, and we sent the first proposal to the bot, I guess, last month, 5 ETH, which intended to. I did a rough calculation, and I assumed it would take 2 months to run out of funds. However, in the last few days, there was like an issue on the bot, which drained the funds. Why we need to refund it early. And that proposal will actually pass in 3 days. And once the fund has been reached to the bot, it should make sure that it will execute all of the transactions we needed to execute manually in the last few weeks. So, and in the way forward, because we do all of the refunds every month, one of the addresses in the reimbursements would just be the bot itself. So we actually don't need separate proposals to refund it, but we would just refund the bot itself in our claims.
Yeah, cool. Cool. Any questions about that proposal? And then the other one in there, which is not boosted, I don't think, is kind of at the bottom, is the Omen Gas Experiment 1.1. And so, Sky, I think you had proposed that one, or you didn't want to speak to that?
No, we can't. We nixed that one. It's fail. We made it fail on purpose. We don't need it.
Okay. Did it get unboosted? Okay, I was confused.
Yeah, it should be failing. Like
okay.
downstake.
It looked like okay. Maybe I had seen it. It was just like unboosted. So I guess downstake is different than unboosted.
Yeah, okay. It was because it was going to be boosted, and then we downstake it to put it back down to regular proposal. But then you need to like let the time run out to like have it.
That's it now. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I use the words like stake and downstake to refer to your individual actions on putting gen either stake to upstake or downstake on the individual proposal. And then if it reaches a certain threshold, it gets into the pending boosting period, and if it maintains that threshold for the period that you need to be in pending, then it's boosted.
Yeah.
We still have an issue with the one that is supposed to be on XDAI that's supposed to be boosted, and it's not boosted.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with that.
I'm about to get to that because, like I was saying, is the only reason I was bringing these up is because literally, like, I'm looking in the proposals to be like, what should we be voting on? What don't I know about it? So purely as a like, it's hard for me to tell that this one was. Now I think it had gotten moved down. But anyway, moving to XDAI, if I understand correctly, that like middle time of pending boosting is not displayed in the XDAI Alchemy UI.
It's it's not working or it's set up differently. Yeah, no one knows. It could be another graph thing though, I guess.
Because I had boosted a proposal yesterday, and yeah, I guess it's not in the pending boosting. It's just in the regular proposals, and so I guess it will hopefully go to boosted proposal when that time period expires, the boosting period, so that it'll have like this stake up.
But it's not.
I guess this is something we've seen with other proposals, or what's the kind of? I'm not sure what's going on here.
So on XDAI, some of the I'm pretty sure some of the original proposals that Elon put in and the Signal one I put in, they went into the boosting normal area, and then there's a 24-hour countdown, and then after the 24-hour, it goes into boosted proposals. That worked before, and it doesn't seem to be working just right now. So, and you don't see the countdown clock on them. So we'll see if they get boosted when 24-hour ends, but it's definitely not showing you the clock. So, but this is a problem because this shows like the trust of using the Alchemy UI. Like if that's happening with these other more advanced schemes and stuff, if if there's bugs in the UI and you can't see like something being boosted, that's could be a big risk. So the UI working is very important for the safety of the DAO too.
Yeah, not just on XDAI, but
yeah.
And I guess is it also hard when people say like the graph does everything for XDAI too? You can pull from, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Well, I wanted to talk just kind of broadly about XDAI or the XDAI base. Sky had the working document that he created, and I think there's a lot of discussion or figuring out what we can do or can't do, and identifying long-term goals, but also like what can we kind of do in the short term, and then obviously like figuring out some of these little kinks in the system. So Sky, I don't know if you want to start off with what your kind of document I put on the screen here.
And Chris and a few others added some good comments, which I incorporated. I guess there's a little bit of like big picture decision. Oh, you're showing it. Of like what the goals were, and there's I think different people had different, because it was never laid out from the start. Different people have different goals. So these two, like originally we were thinking, well, at least in the 5-point proposal, like two of the main goals are to like do really much cheaper voting. Now that 5-point plan didn't say that XDAI version of the DAO is the solution for cheap voting, but it inherently is one of the ways we could do cheaper voting, right? Because layer 2 and all the bigger ideas around mainnet stuff don't exist yet. So today, the cheapest place to do widespread DAO voting would be on this DXDAO, right? So that's kind of why I included that as one of the use cases. And then the question is what types of proposals, like signaling proposals or smaller bounties and things. But Chris, you also included 3 good points of what you kind of were thinking the goals to be of governing products. Now, this is an experiment, right? As you say, it's an experiment with multi-chain governance. I don't know at this point if you would want to use XDXDAO to govern products on XDAI, because we don't even know, we don't have any experience with this DAO. But if the XDAI DAO is the only method to do governance of DXDAO products that are on XDAI chain, like when Mesa and Omen and DXSwap are also on XDAI. I think that this DAO may be a good place to test the relayer and test the governance and test the schemes that we're making. So, but it is experimental. So saying all in, like, well, I don't know if there's another option, if there's another way to even govern those products, unless you're using the DAO that is on XDAI. So that first point is a valid point, governing those products. But then you have to make the assumption that all of those products plus the DAO are all experimental. So you probably don't want to do it with like giant amounts of money, right? And then we'll gain experience and comfort over time. But then like bounties, and there's even been debate about signaling, is like this, and this goes into in this document, is when you know, if we want to do signaling and get 50 people to vote on a signaling proposal, that's going to be really expensive on mainnet. If it's a really important one, like the 5-point plan, maybe you want that on mainnet. For other smaller separate ideas, you could do it on XDAI, and then you could take a set of those signaling proposals over the course of a month or two, and you could basically put them in a batch and what I called roll them up to mainnet, and then mainnet basically ratifies those 10 signaling proposals. So you're basically, as a community, you're using this tool to do lots of cheaper, lower value, quicker voting on XDXDAO, and then every certain amount of period, you take those conclusions that you came to on XDAI and you put them in a batch onto mainnet DXDAO, and that is actually what then ratifies it, that it's the voice of DXDAO agreeing to those. So I called it optimistic rollups, because there is a chance that you do signaling proposals on XDAO, and then you then go to ratify it on mainnet, and mainnet DAO says no, right? And then you basically, that's not the voice of the DAO anymore. Or that's the voice of the DAO saying we don't agree with that. Now, however, the strong characteristic is that the rep holders, we know that the rep holders are the same, basically one-to-one between these two DAOs. So if the rep holders are the same, you would assume that if the rep holders come to an agreement on XDAI DAO, that they will also come to the same agreement on mainnet DAO. So you kind of have to make that assumption. But the point of this doc is to really outline and pinpoint what are the specific, let's say, 2 or 3 things that we would like to start with and experiment with. And then this last part you're on, it has to do with rep. Most of the rep, like when people earn rep through worker proposals, or they earn rep through even a rep boost or something, it sounds like that's all going to stay on mainnet, and it's the safer, better place for it to be. The only rep that would be earned on XDAI would be if we had a very active community around bounties and proposals and people that are earning a bit of rep for doing proposals. So like someone does a bounty and it's like, oh, they tell that guy, okay, submit your proposal on XDAI DAO. They're going to earn a bit of rep. That might be their first rep they ever earned. Now, the question is, should the rep they earn on XDAI DAO, at some point in time, should they get the equivalent amount of that rep on mainnet? Because if we're encouraging people to use XDAI DAO for lots of active, quick, cheaper governance, and people are earning rep, you would think that rep should also be given to them on mainnet. And so this process I came up with, which is mainly going to be, it is a two-way rep bridge, basically. Like if you earn rep on one of the chains, you're going to also get it on the other chain at some point in time. And it's a process to like keep them in tandem, basically. I think that's overall most of what it entails. Any thoughts?
I think it's a good point that, like, people may be interacting for their first time with DXgov through the XDAI DAO, and that's the hope, right? It's more scalable. We'll be maybe doing more with Omen and the products, etc. I think that kind of also prompts us to take another look at what the reward is for each proposal, because I think in theory, if there's a lot of proposals on XDAI, we'd want to kind of calibrate the amount of rep that's earned to be appropriate. And I think we also should probably be thinking about it anyways on mainnet now. It just hasn't really been a conversation yet.
Yeah. So, yeah, that gets back to the discussion of like when people are doing proposals on mainnet, if we're just talking about mainnet and you're getting 500 rep per proposal, you're encouraged. I think the reason for that, and someone originally set that, right? So that was an original setting, and that number matters because there's a million rep in the beginning, and there's 500 rep you earn for doing a proposal. Someone came up with that. So everything else you do is based off of those numbers, basically. Like they are relative to those numbers. And at this point, 500 rep is 0.03% or something like that. But eventually, as we have inflation, 500 rep will become smaller and smaller. So it seems like that was logically decided to like encourage lots of proposals and lots of participation and lots of new ideas into Alchemy. And so it's a great way that if you're active, you can earn rep and you build your rep. So that makes sense that someone started like that from the start. And over time, that culture gets ingrained, and okay, eventually as rep is much bigger, there's a much bigger amount of rep, you're going to earn a smaller percentage of rep, but you're always going to get that 500 for being active. And so the question you're asking, John, is like if you're doing it on XDAI, should you also get 500 rep per proposal, or should you get something like half that, like 250 rep, because it's on the side DAO. I guess it depends on the actions and stuff. But at this point, like the important rep, the biggest issuance of rep, which is worker proposals, I think there's still a plan to have that all being done on mainnet, because that's where the mainnet proposals for payment and rep will be. So that, from a security and protection view, having that on mainnet is more expensive, but it eliminates the risk of like some guy getting some giant amount of rep on XDAI and then saying, "Oh, I want this on mainnet too," because rep is core to mainnet DAO at this point. Well, earning rep is also core. Majority of earned rep is going to happen on mainnet, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple things that you went over there, Sky. And I think just kind of starting out at the sub-parallel DAO, I paused on that for a long time because I actually think it is really important to understand how this exists to the side of DXDAO, but is somehow connected, right? There's no actual DXDAO main chain controls DXDAO, and so I just think in terms of framing it, I think it's a good way of putting it.
Chris, on that point though, if you know, and we know for a fact that the rep owners on mainnet are the same rep owners of this DAO, of this XDAI DAO. We know that for a fact. So isn't that the connection that you're kind of asking about right there?
No, I mean, I think if you own this happens with companies all the time. Companies create a new entity in a new jurisdiction, and that entity is incorporated in that jurisdiction. It may be owned by everyone like in that other place, but I think it's different because it's a different jurisdiction. Because ultimately, it's not like the company enforcing that JV or other entity in that new jurisdiction. It's doing it through the government that controls that. And so I just think it's like a slight like disconnect. And I mean, I don't think it's. I think it's like the right framing, because that's what I'm saying is they are the same groups, but there's nothing that like ties this group to this group, and that's what we're really kind of discussing here, right? It's like what exactly ties
the same people, like because it's the same people.
That's not a tie.
Well, if you do a signaling proposal on XDI,
that now you're talking about something that kind of connects. That's kind of my whole point is that they kind of start as two different groups, and I think that it's just because there's not like a direct control right now. So what we're trying to do is establish something that could, because right now like XDXgov could go off and do whatever they want. Of course, it's the people in that are supposedly the rep holders. But for instance, what if like the DXgov agreed to slash like a bunch of rep, and obviously like only I think like 70% of rep was mapped to DXgov. Anyway, I can get into that. I just wanted to kind of touch on a couple different things here. Yeah, and so I guess when I said the three goals, I think they're like, as I said, govern products on XI chain, experiment with multi-chain governance, and then like fund low-cost bounties. I think there are a lot of things we'll be able to use XI for, but I think we should start thinking specifically like, what can we do with it right now, as opposed to like, what are our long-term goals? We've got like the long-term goals, but in terms of like things that we can do right now, I really think it's those three right there, because anything else I think needs to have like some establishment of legitimacy. And I think that's what you're talking about, Sky, with like signal proposals or rolling up things on chain, all of which I think are important, but like that's how you establish legitimacy. And so I think for me, the kind of focus is on like XDI products and low-cost bounties. And I think low-cost bounties could be like a really, really like huge thing. It's just like a nice, like all these different marketing or naming things that we're trying to do. I think that could all kind of go through XDI. And then I think when we get to like signal proposals and worker proposals, I think those are things that like can get integrated over time, but are going to have to somehow be in conjunction with mainnet proposals. And I think that like alignment of mainnet proposals just will like slow things down a bit. So it's like, what are the things that like XDI, DXDAO can do by itself, really? And now that there's if we fund it with some money, right, and then something else, and of course I think the rep, issuing rep is another thing that it can do.
Yeah, so having a pot of money there for low-cost bounties, which operates on its own, and then competitions is the other thing that could be really that exists in this DAO, doesn't exist on mainnet really, and which is kind of mixed with bounties and competitions, because there's smaller amounts of money involved, and it's yeah, it's almost like it's like a multi-sig, but better than a multi-sig. Like it's like, because it's actually the same rep holders. Yeah.
I think that's a good analogy. Just think about like, there's a lot of things we wouldn't turn over to a multi-sig right now, just for security or kind of decentralization reasons. But there are a lot of things we can do to experiment with that. But I think like going back to the like gas refund stuff at the beginning, like I don't think there's much XDI could do right now to relieve the cost.
Okay.
Like we can't take. I don't think we can take things from that right now and figure out, oh great, over the next month we're going to have reduced gas costs. I think what we can do is try to figure out what can XDI, DXDAO govern now. How can it prove itself? Work out some of the kinks, and then like going forward, it can provide some relief on some of those like gas cost things. And I think that's like the order that I see things in.
Yeah, but so getting back to this is a structural thing, which I think you and I are slightly disagreeing on. But if Omen on XDAI launches in a month and Mesa is there, and then DXswap is on XDAI, you are basically saying DXDAO is going to have full control of those three products. If you don't,
the front end is not controlled by DX.
Well, the parameters of the products, of those products is going to be controlled by this DAO.
Right. So I'm just using Omen. So Omen and Mesa are only front ends. So in those cases, presumably, like the front end would still be controlled by DXDAO, and I would presume the XDAI DXDAO would only control the token registry list. And I would assume that would be true for both Mesa and Omen, which sounds like a good minimum level of governance to kind of like prove themselves. DXswap, I think, is a different thing, because that would be potentially like governing the protocol. But at that point, we like have to have an DXDAO base on XDAI. It's too many X's. We need to have a DXDAO base on XDAI to govern that, because like who else would govern DXswap if not for DXDAO?
Yeah. So before we get to that, and even these parameters of Omen and Mesa, these parameters which are core parameters to those products, we need to come up with some connection that we are comfortable as a group that DXDAO is the voice of DXDAO. And I say it's connected because it's the same repo.
I mean, that's a huge statement. Like DXDAO is this like voice of DXDAO. Like we can't just like snap our fingers and make that happen.
Well, then you can't give it control of DXDAO's products.
I mean, I think it laid out what I think is like the areas it could govern, right? The token registry list, and then it has to govern those products. And that's only if we choose to launch those products. Because in that sense, it would be, I'm presuming, I guess anyone could actually probably launch DXswap on XDAI. But the act of those products launching would come with some, not permission, but some anointing of capability on that platform. And then I think we can try to grow into the voice thing. But I just think like we need to have like a more focused space first on that. But anyway, Sky and I have been talking for a while. Anyone else have different points or agree or disagree with us?
Yes, no. Do more people here agree that like, okay, I get that DXDAO is not DXDAO, and the question is, what is DXDAO? It's like the people that make up the DAO, right? Like, and it holds the money and stuff like that. But like, the fact that you know that it's the same people that control it.
Well,
Right?
DXgov is the same organization, but on another network. That's it.
Yeah. Same organization, same group of people, but on a less safe network.
On another, on another network with another actions that it can do, with another possibilities.
Yeah, so it would be it would be like if we had a multi-sig with every rep holder controlling the multi-sig on mainnet. The question is that multi-sig on mainnet DXDAO? Well,
yeah, but okay, say it like, I think keep it focused on like, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to get like signal proposals, you're trying to get worker proposals, like what are like the individual things we're trying to do? Because like I don't know how we would do those until we accomplish like passing like proposals, like understanding if the pending boosting like works. Like I just think we need to like DXDAO needs to like govern itself first, and I don't think it's proven that it can yet. So it seems a little like premature to talk about like it speaking for DXDAO, but I don't know, this is.
I mean, I think DXDAO is the people, it is the funds, it's the history on mainnet, it's where people's focus are, where people think DXDAO is. So I mean, to me, DXDAO is really only on mainnet right now, right? And even if it's the same voters exactly cloned, you would think that reputation or that those decision making should be in line, but I think for it to have any kind of authority, that would have to be explicitly kind of agreed upon via the mainnet DAO, right? Because just because you have a clone of the rep somewhere does not make it speak for DXDAO.
So we would do a mainnet proposal in order to say the mainnet DXDAO has decided that X DXDAO can speak for DXDAO only on the token lists related to Mesa and Omen, and that would have to pass on mainnet. Because like you give any control of anything or funds to this XDAI DAO, you basically, that is DAO.
Well, so I don't think you need to do an explicit thing for the token list. So I mean, that's already baked into there's actually a proposal right now for the new version of Mesa, right? The new version of Mesa, and you can see this in the release notes very clearly, supports XDAI, and it uses the TCR that is being proposed on the XDAI DAO right now. So
And who controls that TCR?
So the XDAI DAO from the DXDAO's XDAI DAO, right?
That's not speaking for DXDAO.
Well, the DXDAO is about to, whether it depends how this proposal goes, but if DXDAO passes this new Mesa release, it's effectively authorizing XDAI to control the XDAI DAO to control the XDAI token list for Mesa.
Yeah.
And I think that's how, I think that's how the legitimacy grows. Is it's like, here's a specific thing that is being authorized, and then like from there it kind of like can grow on its own. But I think being focused makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think like all the things that DXDAO can't do, right? Which is like not worker proposals. We figured out in some way to fund a remote team, which is a big step in and of itself on main chain. But like all of these other kind of cool things about bounties or marketing campaigns, like that's stuff we can't really do on main chain. And I think like that's an area too that I think is like a focus. Okay, XI will conversation will continue. It'll be I know Elon has got some ideas too, so it'll be good to continue that. I wanted to just check in quickly on DXD ERC20 Guild because I knew there was the BlackRocket group had been testing on it or kind of close to finish, and I'm just wondering like, that could be a potentially big change to the structure. So I know we were thinking about DXSwap, but specifically to governance, how do we want to see that unfold? It's the process of logistics and assigning rep or what?
It's going to be important, yes. For now, what we have is just the first iteration of the smart contracts and the test that they found some minor issues. And there is going to be some refactor done on the test. After that, after we do the refactor on the test and on the contracts, and then we finish writing the test, that will be ready for audit. Once it is audited by Phil, which has been doing great audits by the way, we are going to integrate the ERC20 Guild in the. Hopefully, I mean, that is something that we need to decide with the product people. I want to do it in the DX Trust application, just for example, like a tab where you go and you are going to be part of the governance. And we also have to decide how much reputation the guild is going to have. So there is a lot of question marks in where the guild is going to be, how much rep is going to have. But yeah, this seems that it's going to happen. Hopefully by the end of the year. By the end of the year, we should be good on having the DX guild deployed with some reputation. Yeah, that would be a plan. This is very different from the DXgov guilds, because the DXgov guilds are going to have no rep. They are just going to govern swap fees. So eventually we can even like have we can say like a DXR guild or like workers, DXR workers guild, something like that. I think that will be super useful for us, just to have another where it's going to have some reputation, and we can agree as a group of workers on something like anonymously. So
I could imagine. Excuse me. I could imagine the DXD Worker Guild being used to kind of optimize the costs for worker proposals and stuff, right? If they can basically go through, DXDAO could just have 1 2-month funding budget request for the DXD Worker Guild. A couple $100,000 goes into the guild, and then individual workers are doing, their asks on the money there. And I mean, everybody would be able to see this, but in terms of the execution and the cost, it would be at the guild level. It would be cheaper.
Oh, so John, that related to the cheapening, like our overall governance. You're basically saying like you put instead of having 20 individual worker proposals that like hopefully 25 people vote on, and instead of them all voting on, you batch them all together, and then like the whole DAO votes on the batch. And you want high participation on that vote, but then the individual proposals where like the money gets paid out from the guild or something, you only really need like lesser voter participation, because you just need enough to get it to pass. And so you still get the benefit of like massive participation on the overall batch vote, and then you eliminate a lot of the repetition of everyone voting on all of them at the same time. So you save a lot of votes there, yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds pretty similar to what Nico was talking about at the beginning. And I think that's like a type of model that I think, can scale.
For the
DXD,
DXD,
I got a question for you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just
gonna sorry, go. You go.
I was just going to say, for the DXD Guild, I think it makes sense to kind of like baby steps, like a little bit of rep, see how much voter participation we get, et cetera, before really kind of deciding what the rep allocation would be for like a DXD Guild. Yeah, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm curious what the voter participation is going to look like on XDAI, just because I'm just kind of thinking it might be like it costs more on mainnet, but is there going to be kind of like a switching cost going over to XDAI and trying to, excuse me, like get people to use XDAI, or like is everybody already familiar and using XDAI? Or I'm just curious if we've thought of that.
I was hoping that we see increased voter participation. I mean, partly because all the Gnosis safes had to confirm and map their addresses. So, I mean, in some ways we filtered out any inactive Gnosis safes from mainnet. And then also because the costs are like, basically nothing, right? It's next to nothing to participate on XDAI.
Yeah, we had a pretty good participation on the signaling, the status signaling proposal on XDAI. Like just as high as,
was it like 30%
proposals on mainnet? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I would really love to see us get to a point where we can start passing proposals via absolute majority. I think there's a lot of value to being able to do that.
And talking about legitimacy on what the identity of DXDAO is, if you have an absolute majority on XDAI, I think that says a lot. It doesn't, maybe not speaks for the voice of the DXDAO, but I think that's the type of like legitimacy that would add a lot to XDAI. Cool. I know just 2 more minutes. The last thing I wanted to touch on was just I plan to submit the Governance 2.0 working group proposal at the end of the day, presumably on main chain. I don't know if this is an opportunity. I don't know if the XDAI, we could do it now. I guess we could do both, maybe even do a race. But anyway, for going into that proposal, I had I posted on the forum last week, and I just wanted to kind of get any last feedback. I think the only area that there was any kind of disagreement or misunderstanding was potentially on like how open and recorded the calls would be. Elon was saying maybe they should be closed, and so and yeah, I think Augusto I would be the driver. Presumably, I think most signal proposals, whoever submits the signal proposal has a little bit of something responsibility on that. But yeah, let me just paste the doc in here one more time and then just see if there's any. And I guess the proposal actually does not like specifically say me, or wouldn't say me or anyone else, but I would want to specifically name people in the proposal, like workers that we talked about here, and I could share that there. And then I think at the bottom I have active participants have a responsibility to ensure execution and communication with the community. But we could put something more explicit in there. So thoughts and feedback. Oh, here it is.
Well, was there any additional names kind of added to the like, is the participant list that you're going to post, like, do you have that somewhere?
So, so the one that I wanted to, so the way I was kind of framing this is like when you're kind of getting groups, it's easier to get people to join once you have people like on board. So it's kind of like a song and dance of that. So I think we're in a good position where we have Delphi and DAOstack kind of on board as like kind of the core contributors along with our group. And then I was hoping to reach out once we submit the proposal to be like, hey, this working group is getting started. And these are the people who I don't have like super strong connections with. I know a couple people that I listed there who I actually think would be somewhat interested in joining, but I was going to like present it to them as here's the working group that we have now. It's got a DXDAO group, Delphi, DAOstack, would love to have you on board. But I was planning to only have the DXDAO contributors, Delphi and DAOstack in the actual proposal. Just because I haven't confirmed the other ones yet.
So are you naming names on the DXDAO side or just saying DXDAO contributors?
I was going to name, I think we should name names. Phil would be good. Yeah, actually, definitely. Security. Yeah, so the names I was going to name, and this is kind of anyone, of course, kind of who's interested in these, but I think these people have been talking about these issues for a while, and I do think there's not culpability, but I think responsibility to contribute to that would be myself, John, Augusto, Sky, Geronimo, and then, as I said, Delphi, DAOstack, and then I think it would make sense to name Phil if that would be possible. And then from there, like that's a base that I could then like maybe try to get other people involved. So Fairmont, I'm happy to have involved. I was thinking like they were kind of more bonding curve.
Yeah, I think they're more. I don't think they're so governance focused.
I think we want to like have like another group that like does that. And I think I think Delphi would be interested in that. DAOstack probably, but like we might not be able to get people to like do everything for that. But I think Fairmont should be like core member of the bonding curve discussion.
Okay, sounds great. Eventually, if someone was interested also in joining the group, it would have saw the topic you created on DAO Talk, and yeah, would have added something, right? So, yep.
Did Elon want to be part of the DAOstack group, or does he want to be named as part of DXgov? I might want to just clarify that with him.
That's a good question. Yeah, I definitely think I think it'd be
Thank-
good just to say him specifically, because I don't know. I think he's obviously like straddling both worlds, but yeah, I don't think he would be coming at this just from a DAO stack perspective, but maybe, I don't know if that affects like what hat you wear when you're discussing things.
It might just affect how other people see it, but I think that's important.
Yeah. And then just in terms of like kind of timing and schedule, so as I said, I was going to try to put this to a proposal today. I'm going to craft like another email that is trying to reach out to a couple different people. I think I met the kind of vaguely know the president and Radical Exchange, which I think would be a good group to maybe get involved. And then I don't know personally Santi from Democracy Earth or Ava, but I think they would be potentially interesting people. But I was going to start that like kind of recruitment effort in whatever you want to call it, which would be maybe auxiliary people who don't know that much about DXDAO, but maybe know about governance or other things in like blockchain, who could kind of contribute as from the outside and provide a good perspective. Maybe they're just sitting in on the calls; they're not like doing as much work. But I